Well, that's a tough act to follow. I've never followed a gold medal winner before, so I will struggle along. Anyways, but I want to start by saying that I'm presenting the summary of a longer paper, which is, I think, online here, and that was co-authored with my colleague John McPeak of Syracuse University. It presents work that we've been doing collaboratively over the last 15 years, and believe it or not, myself, it's been over 30 years, so I guess I'm a resilient researcher on pastoralism. So when the conference organizers asked me to prepare a paper about pastoralism and resilience for this conference and give a presentation, I was a bit skeptical at first, like I'm sure many in the room were, although apparently not as many as I thought would be, by this last survey that was reported on. Asking the question of what can this concept add to current analytical frameworks in development practice? I was less cynical when I thought that if any system has shown resilience over the past several centuries, in millennia in some cases, and yet is strongly misunderstood and challenged today, it is the pursuit of mobile livestock production, or what is often called pastoralism. It is a system that has resilience elements such as bounce back, recovery, built into its very essence. Pastoralism mainly occupies arid and semi-arid lands where drought is a normal, and I emphasize normal, feature, and where the system usually is either managing for, coping with, or recovering from shocks over 10 to 12-year cycles. In many cases, the shock is a drought, but increasingly it can be conflict, animal disease, food price spikes, or even floods. It is when a normal climate shock such as drought is coupled with a human-made event like a politically induced conflict or violence, such as happened in some parts of the Horn of Africa in 2011, then one can have famine, a human-induced tragedy. So what I want to do here in this short presentation is to summarize three sets of interrelated questions, and for many of you they'll be fairly obvious that have followed this topic over the years, and ask the three questions: what factors matter for enhancing resilience for pastoralist systems? What major challenges matter for pastoralist resilience? And what local development responses matter for pastoralist resilience? What enhances pastoralist resilience? Number one, and it's, it should be in bold, capital letters, is mobility matters. And it doesn't necessarily mean human mobility, movements, nomadic movements, but animal movements. And mobility is practiced not just in the Horn of Africa, livestock mobility, the pastoral systems, but also in the U.S. and the West. We move our animals all the time seasonally in parts. They may be trucked, not moved on foot, and so on. Because animals must move in these arid and semi-arid, patchy environments where there's pastures and water. It cannot cope with these normal shocks like droughts without mobility. And we have some very good data in the paper that talks about the relationship between livestock deaths, food insecurity, and mobility factors during droughts in the 2000s. The second one, and again it should be emphasized, is access to critical patches of resources at critical times matter. And these are dry season pastures in river valleys, highland areas, water points, those very areas that others, outsiders, and alternative land use systems also desire. And it is timing that is so important. Flexible tenure institutions and collective action that allow this access at critical times. A third factor is markets and food security matters. Pastoralists need cereals. They're deficit food producers. So what goes on both in livestock and cereal markets has a huge impact on resilience issues. Diversification matters, number 4. Herd livestock asset diversification, but also livelihood diversification, and gender questions become very important there also. Second set, what challenges matter for pastoralist resilience, and many of those are counter to those ones that enhance resilience. Number 1 is encroachment and land losses to different land use systems. Perhaps no other land use systems lost more land to irrigation, tourism, outside investors, and so on. Second one is increased population and settlement among pastoralists themselves, immigration from outside, as well as town growth. A third challenge is conflict and violence. Often these are remote areas where security is minimal, and often large areas are unused in these pastoral range areas because of conflict and violence. And then a fourth factor is what I call political marginalization and misunderstandings of pastoralism, which really challenges pastoralist resilience in the types of policies that are directed towards pastoral areas. So the third set of questions I asked, then, what local responses and developments matter? First one, that pastoralists themselves are doing, and in some cases, development assistants are helping these communities. Intensification of production systems. These are not static systems. They're intensifying to the extent they can, incorporating increased feed, supplemental feed, even growing fodder in some cases, grasses. A second response has been what I call drought cycle management, increasingly new technologies, trucking water, purchasing feed and fodder, mobile phones, which if we had time I could talk quite a bit about, have had amazing rates of adoption among pastoralists and have really affected their seasonal movements as well as the timing of their livestock sales. Again, increased diversification, especially the incorporation of drought-resistant herd species like camels and goats. And then investment in things like in education, which increases their ability to diversify into non-farm employment and so on. Fourth fact, local response has been increased regional cross-border coordination with neighboring communities across international borders, livestock both in terms of livestock movements, but also cross-border trade. The fifth factor, new forms of risk management. Again, diversifying assets and investments, and something my co-author's been heavily involved in is index-based livestock insurance, which is being piloted in this area as a form of risk management. The sixth factor then that's been responses has been the development of new market linkages and responses, and we talk a lot about the emergence of camel export trade. Again, you have to remember that from the Horn, about $1 billion in live animals and animal products are exported annually from this region, something that needs to be recognized. And lots of potential in other markets as well. So to conclude, mobile pastoralism will continue in low rainfall rangelands throughout Africa for the simple reason that a more viable alternative land use system for these areas has not been found. That is the reality, but the nature of pastoralism in 2020, and I even say 2030, will be very different than today. It will remain the economic foundation of these areas, although pastoralism will be practiced by an increasing minority. The livestock revolution that had been predicted for the livestock sector will continue as urban markets in Africa will create even more demand for livestock and livestock products, which along with export trade to the Middle East and Asia will further solidify the economic significance of pastoralism. And I would only conclude that this future scenario of increased market development, non-farm employment, investment in education, and new changes in livestock production, with still mobile pastoralism being the core, is obviously preferable for pastoralists, non-pastoralists, and governments than a current picture of heightened poverty, food security, and conflict. So I'll end with that. Thanks.